Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. Today, I have a very special guest. He is my brother from another mother, certified financial planner professional, former U.S. Congressional candidate, and the president of the Jason Howell Company. He also just recently wrote a book called The Joy of Financial Planning, 7 Strategies for Transforming Your Finances and Reclaiming Your American Dream. He also is the host of the Joy of Financial Planning podcast. So we'll be talking about all of that on the show. So I'm very excited to have him with us today. Without further ado, Jason Howell.
Luis, yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy now with your book launch and all that, so I appreciate you taking the time to school us in here for a little bit.
This is what the time is for. Happy to be on the show.
Thank you so much. So we want to talk about family governance, developing high net worth families. So I wanted to ask you, the first thing was, what do you consider a high net worth family?
You know, I consider personally anyone that's got over $1 million in net worth. I think the real reality is people who are over 5 million. And I almost get that from, if you ever wanted to study the Certified Private Wealth Advisor designation, they kind of want you to have clients that are in that area, and they call that high net worth. To me, that's sort of a bridge almost getting to ultra high net worth, but that's more like 20 million. So for me, anyone over $1 million to 5 million, that's to me, high net worth, at least the first leg of the ladder stool getting up there.
Got it. And is that investable assets or just overall net worth?
It's overall net worth, but there's a feeling that you'd at least qualify for any of the financial advisory firms that would all want to work with you. So I want my clients and my client families to be in a place where they have the pick. If you've got $500,000, you can go to any Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch's, Edward Jones's, they'll take you.
Right.
But you might need $1 million for any of the independent firms out there, or maybe 2 or 3 million. So when I'm thinking about developing a high net worth family, I'm thinking of getting them to that place where any level of expert would be wanting to work with them.
Gotcha. Okay. Fair enough. Sounds good. So why is creating high net worth a worthy goal for you?
Well, my goal overall, and it took me a while to get there. You were kind enough to talk about some of the things I've done before, and it's always been this sort of reaching towards self-actualization that I never quite got. I would get closer and closer, but I knew it wasn't it, and at least I was crazy enough to take the risk to keep trying stuff, and finally getting to this point where I said, I don't want to be a jack of all trades and master of none. I'm going to go in hard on something that makes sense to me, that resonates with me. And for me, that's personal finance. It's always kind of been in the periphery. And I finally dedicated myself to the information, to the content, and then to the education to other people. That comes from my family background, as a United States-born son of immigrants. My family didn't know a lot about the securities markets and the like. And so I was interested in it, but had to learn kind of on the job, like most of my peers, at least some of my peers. And then when it came to looking at other people and what we're all going through as a generation, I found that we all need to know this stuff really well. And the more that I learn is the more that I realize that there's so much to learn about finances and financial planning. So I figure the best way I can sort of serve my community, serve my country outside of public office is to empower as many people as I can with not just financial literacy, but real financial empowerment, so that then they can take their regular lives and do great things. I always say you really can't change the world if you're broke. And so I want folks to feel like, all right, I've got some extra money, which means I've got extra time, which means I've got extra leverage to do some of the good things that need to be done.
Yeah, and that hits home for me when you're talking about your past experiences and how they led you to where you are today. If you don't mind, would you share some of what you've done in the past and how you ended up being here as being a financial planner, having your own company?
Sure. I had as I said, I was born in the U.S., I was born in California, but I kind of got the immigrant experience, twofold. Number one, my parents. Number two, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my dad wanted to move back to his home country in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I thought we were just going to visit relatives. At least that's how it was sold to the 6-year-old. So I was like, oh, 2 weeks. Yeah, I definitely want to go. Let's do it. 2 weeks go by, month goes by, 3 months go by. It turned out my dad was interested in a lot more things than just visiting his siblings. And we stayed there 5 years.
Wow.
When we left, we came to Virginia, where my dad had a sister, and instead of going to California. And I had to enter the public school system, really not knowing what was important, right? What was cool? I had no idea.
Right.
I had black sneakers on. Apparently, white sneakers were cool. I had my pants just like on. Apparently, you needed to roll them up and cuff them. I didn't know that. So I had to learn these important, critical things as a newbie, as a person that was new to the entire area. And I kind of got that immigrant experience because I had a bunch of siblings. And so money was tight when we moved back, and we just had to deal. But thankfully, we were one of the richest counties in the country who went to school.
Wow.
My dad always made sure. And so here I was juxtaposed to a lot of folks who were doing pretty well. It didn't bother me. It was actually cool. Like we're here. We're not even doing as well. So it was pretty cool, but it certainly gave me ambition, as my dad gave me ambition as well, and gave me an opportunity to say, there are great things that I want to do. So my dad had a PhD. I knew I was going to get a college degree. That wasn't a question. In fact, I even assumed I was going to get a grad degree. But because I majored in accounting, I assumed that I'd get the CPA first. And so I did accounting. While I was in college, I was a banker. I was a banker for 3.5 years in the early 90s. So I knew about higher interest rates and what they used to be. I knew what a CD was. I learned what a Social Security check was. I knew why people deposited $99,000 in their CDs. FDIC insurance was $100,000.
Right.
Just learning this sort of on-the-ground finance was my beginnings. And there was always this opportunity to kind of get into the financial planning business. Really, it was the financial advisor business back then. My first job offer after school was with American Express Financial Advisors. I turned the job down after 6 interviews. They offered me the job, and I turned it down because I asked, what are we going to do? And he's like, for 2 weeks, you're going to be cold calling. You'll make $5 an hour. If you survive, then we'll send you to Minneapolis for training for a week. If you get through that, you'll come back and you'll be back on the phones. No salary. And usually people make about $50K their first year, which is actually a lot of money for 1997.
Definitely.
But I was an accounting major, so I could get an accounting job, and I made $30K, and I took that instead. But it's been this sort of, every other year I'd run into this profession, I'd get a job opportunity, and I'd turn it down. And eventually, after I ran for office in 2012, I finally said yes to the opportunity as a way to essentially serving my community, but still getting compensated since I didn't actually get elected.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. That's quite the story, man. So tell me a little bit about family governance. What exactly is that?
Now, family governance is old school. It goes back to, as far as I could find, the days of Julius Caesar. And it's really an idea of, this particular family has a lot of wealth. Julius Caesar owned about 25% of the Roman Empire at the time. So that's a lot of wealth.
Yeah.
And you set up people, a small group of people, to essentially take care of that wealth. Now, usually that's in the form of a family office. And so, a family office, you might have heard like, J. Rockefeller. J. Rockefeller was one of the first people in the United States to set up what was called a family office.
Right.
We literally had employees just working with the estate, with the trusts, making sure everything was, tight, taken care of. And in that, they also looked at how to pass those assets down, and maybe even the values and standards of the family down. Usually the patriarch or the matriarch doesn't want to just give the money back. They want to say, hey, I want my kids to keep on the traditions of our last name. And so this idea of family governance is usually tied to a family office. And so it's usually tied to the definitely ultra high net worth, where they're at the 25 million plus. And they're saying, I have no worries about my kids being financially independent, but I am worried about my kids being independent. I am worried about my kids having a work ethic. I am worried about my kids, being generous and being disciplined. And so how can I work with all of the advisors, like the estate planner, financial advisor, tax person, to make sure I keep as much money as possible for them, but then how can I also work with them to pass along those values? And so the best, family office firms have that as part of their offering, where they say, we will work with your second generation to ensure they understand your wealth, they understand how you earned it, they understand what the trust means for them, they understand exactly what you wanted them to learn all along. There is no such, opportunity for anyone that's below ultra high net worth. And so when I created my firm, my goal was to have this sort of a la carte family office. And I was trying to partner with the CPA and the estate planner and say, I will sit with you, with those folks if you'd like me to, because I want you to have this holistic experience. But family governance has given me another layer of opportunity where I can say, I will sit with you and your kids, but more, I'll help you bang out what would be a family constitution about what you believe in, about how you manage your financial life, and how you want your family overall to manage your financial life.
Gotcha. And have you gotten any pushback from the other professionals in your clients' teams, if you would? Or has it been a welcoming experience for all of you to kind of work together? Because I know some people want to be like the quarterback in the situation, right?
Yeah. I typically haven't gotten pushback. If you read any of the materials that, an estate attorney has, they want that collaboration as well. The CPA, if they're doing the collaboration, I don't intimidate them and saying, I want to be in charge. I just say, I want to learn what you know about our mutual client. And so it really isn't about me having to have everyone acknowledge me as the point guard or the quarterback or the conductor, because if you are, you are. Leadership isn't position, it's action, right?
Right.
If the accountant was leading everything, then fine, I'll be subservient to the accountant. I'll communicate with the accountant. That person knows more about taxes than I should know, and I'm going to coordinate with that person. Same with the estate planner, same with the mortgage person. Whenever it's their at bat, I kind of step back and work with them. So it doesn't have to be a conflict between us. I just work as part of the team. I just want to ensure that there is a team atmosphere, and most of the people I work with want that as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you took a model from like the Rockefellers and Julius Caesar and applying it
Yes.
to people that have less than $1 million with the goal of increasing that over time and then being able to manage their life goals as well as bring that same kind of power that the ultra rich use to our families and then have the kids continue that legacy, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're part of an immigrant family. I'm part of an immigrant family or close to it. Like we're all part of immigrant families for the most part, but some of us are closer to the boat than others, right?
Definitely.
I know that at least in my world, one of the reasons I didn't accept a job in this profession was because my dad told me not to. He thought it was a sales job, and the job I was going for was a sales job. I didn't know it at the time,
Right.
but it was. And he wanted me to have a nice salary as an accountant. And he called me an accountant all throughout my career, for as long as he was alive, no matter what job I had. People like that, they are, default patriarchs and matriarchs. If they're the first generation that's here as immigrants, they are the family leaders. And I have found that with a lot of the families I work with in the DC area, we have a lot of wealth, but we have a lot of people who are working hard for that wealth. You only work hard for that wealth if you're the first generation of wealth. They may not be the first generation in their family in the area or in the country, but they're the first generation of wealth. So you have two income families who are only two income because they have to be, because no one would actually necessarily want to be. They're working 50 hours a week each. They're a lawyer, they're a banker, and they're making really good money and they're starting to save it. But that's not enough. Like they actually really want to make an impact on their family on a generational basis. And if they're not careful, all they're going to get is their kid going to a really nice college and maybe a relationship that they don't want because they're working 50, 60 hours a week. And so what I do as best I can is say, listen, the Rockefellers are in their seventh generation. They're worth about $11 billion as of 2016. Usually wealthy families, there's a stat out there that says 70% of wealthy families go from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, meaning the first generation earns it, the second generation maintains it, the third generation spends it all. Usually within 3 generations, the wealthy people we admire lose all that money. And so what they've done, or what some of our peers have done who are at a different level with a different market, they said, let me provide you a service that helps to ensure that money stays in the family. Well, I mean, my dad would have liked some assistance on helping money stay in the family, or the people that are here that are two-income families, they'd like that assistance. They have values and standards and traditions they'd like to pass on. There's nobody in or outside of our profession that says, let me help you with that. And so what I'm trying to do as best I can with the model that I have is make this available so we can create more high net worth families. And my hypothesis is, if we've got more people who are seriously trying to do well financially, we're going to have more people who are good that would actually go after opportunities for power and make the world a better place. Right now, most of the people who want money and power are not necessarily the nicest people or the best people. And so we got to go out there and shake the trees and find the good people and say, let me give you this power so that you can be in charge. And that's my way of sort of spreading out, my own power.
Gotcha. Okay. So how can 6 and 7 figure families implement family governance?
Good question. Number one, we do it as a collective, as independent financial advisors. We start, right? We ask them what their concerns are, what their goals are. But it really is a series of conversations beyond those initial ones that we would do according to the CFP program. And so number one, it's starting with your family story. Identify, the two people who are in charge that you're looking at. And if they wanted to do it themselves, they can. They've got a spouse. They kind of know the family because they visit them at least once or twice a year. But actually articulate on paper what your money story is individually, then come together. That's step one. Step two, identify what is actually happening in your financial life today. Who pays the bills? Why? Who works? Why? Who works a lot of hours and who doesn't? Why? Or if you both work a lot of hours, why? Talk about that. What's happening? Who's planning for the long term? Why? A lot of families I work with, and it seems to be pretty common, the male is the person that's doing all kind of the long-term, big-time investing, insurance, and the female might be the one who's maybe taking care of the bills and the day-to-day, except that's kind of backwards, right? The female, more often than not, is going to outlive the male. More often than not, males marry younger females. Now they double down on the fact that they're going to outlive them. And so when it comes to holding the bag at the end, it's likely going to be the female. So really, if you question it, the female should be leading the long-term vision of the family's finances because they're going to end up with it in the end. So having these questions are really important. That's only step two. Step three is now talking about aspirations. Now, normally as financial planners, you might ask about goals and concerns, but this is a little bit deeper where you're just sort of imagining how you would like not only to live, which is a typical financial advisor conversation, but how would you like the day-to-day to look when you're talking about finances? Would you like to argue less about money? Would you like to not do the day-to-day bills because you hate it and you just did it by default? Would you like to get into the investing because you actually have an interest there? And so we're talking about those kinds of aspirations as well. And as we get through these series of questions, we start to see words that repeat, values that repeat, internal ideas around money that sort of come out, that maybe were understood on a surface level, but not really understood on a deep level. And from there, we start to craft what would be a mission statement for the family, what we want our last name to mean. Like if you think of the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and the Bushes and the Romneys, we know those names because they are in public service. They also happen to be fairly wealthy. And part of their value system has been service because they can go beyond the money because it's not about money for them anymore.
Right.
About what your values are. So what would you like your family to be about that they can lead? You could pass those things along and then you build out the final step is what's called a family constitution. And it's your constitution, so you can make the laws whatever you'd like. But it's simple stuff like, we will always, we'll always give some of what we get paid, whether it's allowance or whether it's paycheck. It can be big things like we will never have debt, no matter what. That could be for a mortgage. Like, well, we won't have a mortgage debt either. We'll save up for a house. And that could be, if you're a Dave Ramsey person, that might be your thing.
Right.
But these are the things you would have in your constitution that if they're broken, you would also have, this is how we deal with it. Just like our U.S. Constitution has, this is how you deal with Congress. This is how you deal with the president. This is how you deal with your family when, someone screws up and overspends or gets in debt or what have you. You'd build this all out within your nuclear family and as far out as you'd like when it comes to your extended family, whoever wants to partake in that. And if you were leading that, then you become the patriarch or the matriarch of your family. And that's a real gift to your surname.
Wow, that is so impactful. I didn't realize you go very deep.
Yes.
That is unbelievable. Now, how long of a process is that? Like how many meetings, over what time frame?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm still working it out with my clients. I gave a presentation at our last conference where we met, and someone asked me how I deliver this. I had this all kind of written out in what I called a worksheet, and it was 15 pages. So my wife called it a workbook.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of space in those 15. There's a lot of lines to write stuff in, so it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But I've given it to clients, and they've never gotten through to the last part.
Okay.
And so I've given it to them typically after we've done the financial plan. What I'm experimenting with now is giving them this workbook before the financial plan. And one other idea I've had is actually, well, there's been two others, giving them a part of it so it didn't seem as intimidating, because everyone has the reaction you did. Maybe the first section of like write out your story and just say that's your homework.
It's a good idea.
And then get that back, right? The last thing I'm thinking about doing, and I haven't put in place yet, is actually hosting a weekend seminar where I can bring my clients in and facilitate this so that they're taking time away from their day-to-day and just doing it.
Making the time out for it. Yeah, I see that time management is a key part in your business as well. So is the concept that you going after is basically, if your money is right, then you'll have more time to dedicate to what's truly important.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. If your money's right, then we talked about this area and that there's wealth in this area. What else we have in this area are very ambitious people and ambitious for great causes. We have a lot of lawyers in this area. Most lawyers I know started out in law school because they wanted to change the world. And they get in law school, and depending on whether they had a student loan or not, and most of them do, because again, if they were wealthy, they wouldn't go to law school because they wouldn't be lawyers. That's what I've learned about lawyers, which I kind of would have thought the opposite. I've learned that, and no, we don't want to be lawyers. If we were wealthy, we wouldn't be lawyers at all if I had a choice. Good to know. So they have causes, especially in the DC area. And my belief is they would attack those causes with a lot of energy if they weren't also attacking, this long work day they have. Someone pays you $100,000, $200,000 a year, they're going to take $200,000, $400,000 out of you. And that's usually in the cost of time. And so, where I have there's a couple, for an example, who came to me, and I'm always impressed with the idea of a Harvard law attorney coming to me. All right. Which just shows how special our profession is and how unique
Absolutely.
and important it is. But here she was, and her husband, who worked in finance, but corporate finance. Together, they made about $500,000 a year. They invested very conservatively because they had no idea how to invest. They built up a lot of money, hundreds of thousands, in their checking and savings accounts because they didn't know how to invest. And they were coming to my business partner and I and saying, do our financial plan. We worked through their financial plan and we asked them, is there a scenario you want to look at? They have 3 kids. They're in their 30s.
Wow.
And they said, yeah, she's kind of thinking, she told me, like, I'm kind of thinking of maybe getting out of this law firm where I make $300K and, being inside counsel somewhere. And I asked her, like, how much of a salary change would that be? And she said, well, it would cut my salary in half.
Wow.
But the reality was, when we did the plan and stretched it over the next 40 years, they'd have like $11 million left over. They didn't spend a lot. They had hundreds of thousands of dollars saved.
Gotcha.
They worked a lot. They made a lot of money. So they were in a really great situation for a lot of flexibility. So here's an example of, if she wanted to go after a cause, and even if that cause was raising 3 great kids, she could probably cut her hours by 20 or 30 a week. And reduce the actual money she earned but still have the resources she needed to accomplish the things she wanted. And so family governance in part is about intentionality. What do you want your family to be known for? What do you want to do with your life? Let me use family governance as one of 7 comprehensive financial strategies to help you basically achieve what you're trying to achieve.
God, yeah, that's impactful, man. That's life changing right there. Still being able to achieve your goals and working less is not always about making the most money, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, Mother Teresa didn't need any money to change the world, right?
That's true.
A lot of folks can adjust things once you figure out what it's going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then speaking of family governance, let me ask you, how do you apply this to your own family?
Yeah, bit by bit is how I apply it. An anecdote I have is, one of my brothers unfortunately got divorced. His car loan, which goes to one of your previous podcasts, was jointly managed with his now ex-wife, and he wanted to get out from under that car loan. So he couldn't refinance it with her because that's all messy.
Right.
And so he got out of it, and he got another car. And he sent out a text message to all of us siblings. As I told you, there were a number of us from when we moved, right? We're all grown now. And he says, "Hey, I got a Maserati." And I looked up this Maserati because it was a 2017, right? And I looked it up, and it was actually like the smallest Maserati on the market, and it was 2017. And I estimated he probably spent anywhere from 30 to 50K. I mean, he didn't spend it, he financed it.
Right.
So I was like, okay. And meanwhile, my siblings were like, "Hey, man, that's awesome. Good for you. You got this Maserati." I knew the reason he needed to get a different car, but he didn't need to get a Maserati necessarily. And so in these text messages, I didn't know how to respond because they were congratulating him for it's kind of a win, after this, divorce.
Right.
Kind of get something nice. But I eventually figured out to word something to the effect of, "Congrats. I'm glad you got out of the situation you were in. What would be really cool is if we all saved, and your car is worth between 30 and 50. It'd be great if we all saved, all siblings, between 30 and 50K, and we could send a text message and congratulate each other for that."
Yeah.
So that's not a formal family governance structure, but that's me as the financial guy in the family trying to set a different target for my siblings who aren't necessarily minded in that way, or not seeing examples, right? He's the second or third eldest, I guess. So they're not seeing examples to celebrate around that. I'm giving little things. And so if your listeners are trying to think of what's the way I can sort of dribble this out, it's setting the example, of course. I mean, that's always the best way to do it. But then even in your celebrating of other folks, celebrate the right things and give them targets. And that's a way to start.
Yeah, that's so funny because I have a WhatsApp group, my siblings too. And yeah, I see the same kind of thing, people posting photos. "Hey, I just got this car, and it's, always reason for congratulations. But it's true. Nobody has ever posted something like, "Hey, I just maxed out my 401k this year."
Yeah, exactly. Do that. Oh man, I better max my 4. What's a 4?
Right. I've never seen that in the group.
Right.
But maybe thank you for the idea. I probably should start doing something like that.
There you go. That's for you.
Right around December. "Hey, I just maxed out my solo."
Yeah, I just refinanced my house, reduced my mortgage by $200 a month. You can do that? I didn't know that.
Right. Yeah, that's so true, man. That's funny. So let's jump right into the book, man. The Joy of Financial Planning: 7 Strategies for Transforming Your Finances and Reclaiming Your American Dream. So tell us a little bit about the book.
The book was a long time coming, as all books are. And I think most people I know, I say most only because I spoke to someone on Friday and they actually told me they didn't have a book in their head, which was the first time someone ever said that. But most people I know have a book in their head and they just don't start writing it. I've been wanting to write a second book. I wrote a small book 9 years ago for a long time. And when I committed to this profession, I knew it was going to be about finances. And I can tell you and your listeners, I just had the idea of writing a little business card book that a lot of people do, where they get speaking engagements and they get locally pretty famous. And the book is basic, right? It's like the top 10 strategies for blah, 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 or whatever. And so, I teach a class at American University. Might be teaching one soon at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, where I went to school. And I got one of my textbooks. And I'm like, let me see all the categories, just so I, wake up my brain to all the categories. And then I took my old CFP books out and I got those categories. I merged them. And I did an outline because I'm a planner. I'm supposed to be like planning about this. So I had this like 11-page outline. There's a lot of categories.
Wow. Yeah.
In finance. And so I all right, I got the outline done. Now I'm going to get started. Section 1, Chapter 1. Start with the keyboard. And I'm looking at that outline. And I just couldn't write this cheesy book. I couldn't do it. I was taking forever. People ask me how long it took to write the book. I say 3 years, but really a year. It wasn't until about 2 years in, I finally realized what I wanted to say for real about finances. And it wasn't just something cheesy to put out there. It was something that combined everything I've been a part of, including running for office, my view on the economic reality that our generation faces that private or previous generations didn't face, my view that people in the area, especially the DC area, want to change the world but can't change it even if they're not broke, but they're living hand to mouth, you can't do it.
Right.
And so when I finally put those thoughts together, that's where the subtitle about, achieving the American dream came out. And then it just wrote itself. Just took a long while to write, but it just wrote. So for me, it's a manifesto. It's a thesis. It's, hey, I see you, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. I know what we're going through. I'm going through it too. I see it too. We need financial planning more than any other generation that's ever been in this country. Here's how you do it. And now that you know what to do and how to do and maybe who to work with, now you can go change the world.
Gotcha. And how are you defining the American dream?
People ask me that too a lot.
Usually people say, oh, it's just owning a home, right?
I know. I don't say it's that. That's marketing. Owning a home, going to college, getting a good job and staying there for 50 years, right? All three of those are out, right? For anyone that's experienced 2008, our generation, that's not necessarily a big win. Anyone who's had like 6 figures of an academic mortgage for college, that's not necessarily the way to the American dream. And we've known for 2 generations now that you can't go to a job and stay there 50 years. So that's out too. So everything we've been taught about the American dream that's been marketed to us is not true. It's been proven. The things, though, that we were taught about the American dream, like in history class, those things actually still are true. It's about transformation. It's about a new start. It's about leveraging the capitalism in this country to do anything you want. You're only inhibited by your imagination. I mean, those aspirations are still there. They're still real. They're not for different, sects of the country. It's harder, right? Some people have to start further back than others, but it's still available to us. And my belief is we have different opportunities than there were a generation ago. We have different struggles, but we have new opportunities. The internet gives us so much access to opportunity that we didn't have. I wrote a book. I can market this book in 6 different ways, with all of those not paying anything. And I have access to the entire world. That wasn't the case a generation ago.
It's true.
Right? So it's also hard for me to buy a house because I have to spend $600,000 or $700,000. That wasn't the case a generation ago, but it's even, right?
Right.
I can figure it out. And so that's what I see in our generation. We've got great challenges, but we've got great opportunities.
Gotcha. So what kind of transformation is possible by reading your book?
We can transform the trajectory of our families. Most people I know are in sort of that middle income, if you want to call it middle class area. But if you've heard any studies, if you listen to some of the politicians, you know that net pay hasn't increased for 10 or 20 years, actually 24, 29, 30 years, depending on what stats you look at. There's a website, inequality.org, and it says really since 1970s, our pay has not increased, adjusted for inflation at all in the middle income tier. So we're not talking about folks who didn't get college degrees or didn't get a profession either way. We're talking about folks who are hanging out with you, that maybe went to school with you, that maybe you used to work with, adjusted for inflation, we're not being paid any more since 1979. What's different is, and we're in the top 20%, FYI. Anyone who's making more than 100K is in the top 20% of income. So that's kind of interesting. You're in the top 20. You may not be in the top 1, but you're in the top 20. You make over 400, you're closer to the top 1. The people who made over 400, their income has increased a lot more. And so you do see this bifurcation. And what we know is that we haven't had as much disparity in wealth since the late 1920s, right before the Depression. And so where we are headed is essentially for bankruptcy. That's where we're headed. The people in the middle, you already assume the people who are in poverty are not headed to a good place. But the people in the middle, we're not headed for a great place. And all it takes is for one of those two income partners to lose their job. And all of a sudden, the world crashes around, especially in my area. People living in $700,000, $1 million homes that don't look like $1 million homes we used to dream of when we were kids.
Right.
And they're servicing those with, 6-figure salaries, which sound great to our parents, but we don't tell them how much our house is because we'd be embarrassed. If we have cars, it used to be a car payment was $300 or so a month for a 3-year loan. You talked about a 3-year loan now is $700-800 for a car payment. So now you extend it out to a 6-7-year loan to get it close to 400, and you're paying $60K for a $30K car. So again, lose your job, one partner or the other, the world is upside down. The transformation I see is taking people off that that cliff that's coming and putting them in a place where they can be prepared, they can be safe, they can take advantage of opportunities, they can build a legacy. And they can only do that now with really solid financial planning skills, including the 7 strategies I mentioned. As I touched on before, you wouldn't expect that to be the case. Our parents didn't need a financial planner or financial planning skills. They could just work hard because their pay matched, and they could save because they could save enough. And the same with our grandparents. And if they did those good things, they were good. But we could save as much as we can. We could work as hard as we can and get paid 6 figures, and we could still lose. So we need good financial planning, including family governance, if we really want to achieve what we're dreaming of. And that's what the book is about. That's the transformation I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's very powerful. There's a lot of people out there making 6 and 7 figures who still live paycheck to paycheck because lifestyle inflation, right? You get the nicer car, the bigger home.
Yeah. But you know what? Even folks, our age or younger, you come out of college, and if you have an academic mortgage and you rent and you need a car, it might have been sensible for you to buy a used car, but you didn't, right? I make $150K, I should have a car I have a car loan on.
Right.
So you got the car loan, you got the student loan, maybe you bought a house, maybe you didn't, but you got rent, you got a cell phone bill, right? Your parents didn't have a cell phone bill or a data plan, as Doug Pompar talks about.
Yeah, cable.
Yeah, cable, that's over $100. And I've tried to mess with my cable. It's impossible to get a package that includes any channels that's less than 3 figures a month.
Yeah.
So the answer is, all right, get rid of all of cable. That's what some advisors talk about. You could do that, but who's going to do that? We really need internet. And so I called my provider and asked, what if I just went down to internet? How much would that cost? Without some discount or some kind of crazy trick, still $100.
Yeah.
Right. So, if I'm paying $100, I may as well pay 120 or 30 to get some channels.
Get the TV, yeah.
Right. So, we're stuck in a place for something that should be a luxury, that because of internet, of high-speed internet, it's not a luxury anymore. And it really puts us in a position to say, even if you're being mostly good, you can still lose. And that's what we have to really fight against.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you bring up a good point. Like back in the day, maybe parents or grandparents are able to work in one job, retire with a pension, and then they'll have like a house paid off by the time they retired. They had a pension, Social Security. And now the responsibility to save for retirement has been shifted to us. Most of us are probably not going to get a pension unless we work for like the state, county, or something like that. But other, military, things of that sort. But other than that, we have mostly just 401ks and other retirement plans at work. So we have to take the responsibility, into our hands. So I'm glad that there are planners like yourself who are focusing on helping folks not only get the time and assets under management, but not just financial assets, but actually like just the family asset, the legacy that they want to leave, and leave to their kids. So one last question for you. How does the book content mirror what you do for your clients?
Almost exactly. I have 7 strategies that I lay out in my financial plan. There's the joy of harmony, which is the family governance. There's the joy of enough, which is spending and earning money. There's the joy of balance, which is ensuring that you're earning or paying attention to the interest you're earning versus the interest you're spending, right? The accumulation of both. There's the joy of safety, which speaks to all of the risk management and insurances. So not just life insurance, not just health insurance, car insurance, umbrella policies that look at all your liability, looking forward to long-term care or not long-term care. Like you, I don't sell any of that stuff, but I educate my clients in those categories so that they know if they want to go talk to someone about it, they don't have to go there naked. They can go there armed and clothed with some information, and they can come back to me because I know about that stuff. So if someone says, you need XYZ policy, I'll be able to tell them, well, here's the positive, but by the way, here's the negative and how it affects the rest of your plan. And the last 3 categories are the joy of legacy, which we've touched on, the joy of opportunity, which includes all kinds of investing, not just the securities markets, but investing in real estate as my dad wanted to do and most immigrants want to do.
Right.
Or investing in yourself or investing in your business. The stock market is nothing but investing in other people's businesses. If you have a business, then you can get a much better return than getting in the market and investing in an index. So I'm open to that because I'm a financial planner. I'm not just an investment advisor. And the very last joy of the 7 strategies, the 7 joys, is the joy of time. Identifying and speaking to how you want to live in retirement. What kind of work might you be willing to do? What kind of place would you like to live in? How would you like to live your hour by hour lifestyle? The last thing I'll touch on is that there's an opportunity in that too. Since most of the people I work with are knowledge workers, over the course of 20, 30 years, they become wisdom workers. And one of the opportunities we have in 2019 and certainly 20 years from now is that we can leverage all of that knowledge we know into content. And we can offer that content to the rest of the world. And we need less than 1% to consume our content and 0.1% to pay for the content they consume. And we'll have income for life. And if you've got good health and good income, you'll never run out of money.
Gotcha. No, absolutely. Well said. Can you tell me a little bit more about knowledge versus wisdom in that context?
Sure. I was fortunate to be introduced to this idea because my dad was old enough to work with Peter Drucker when we were in California. And Peter Drucker was known as he invented the phrase, the knowledge worker. And he was kind of the consultant expert. He was the one that, kind of called the rest of the second half of the 20th century as being the age of the knowledge worker. And it's like what we know now. It's services and people using their expertise. Wisdom worker is a relatively new phrase, and I've tried to find who coined that, just like, Peter Drucker, but I can't find the actual person. So it came from somewhere, but it's the idea of taking the knowledge that you're gaining. You're gaining knowledge, I'm gaining knowledge all the time, but taking that knowledge and compounding it over 10 more years. And you've got 15 years in the business, you've got more wisdom than I do. But compounding this CFP knowledge and compounding life knowledge with all this time, it puts you in a credible position to say, you know what, I've got some things to share. And what makes my information more interesting than the information you can do an internet search for is I'm applying my personal perspective based on experience. And so I can become a wisdom worker. I can work on my speaking skills and go out and speak to my experience and knowledge. I can work on my writing skills and write about my experience and knowledge in a blog post, in a book. And people have every right to consume it because it's my take, it's my wisdom on top of that knowledge, and it's curated knowledge. And so it's a real opportunity for people, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a group of mind shared folks, a mastermind group. Folks are compensated now for what they know and for what they can translate based on their experience. And that's my ideal wisdom worker.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, that's pretty deep, man. So speaking of podcasts, I know you also have the Joy of Financial Planning podcast. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, just go to Joy of Financial Planning and Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or Google, wherever you listen, and you should be able to find it. I'll tell you, I made this podcast with a solution called Anchor, ANCHOR.FM. What's great about it is I can just use my phone to record. Then I can go online and I can get, music that they've paid for, or that's for some reason it's free, and make it sound, pleasant for folks to listen to. What I try to do in that podcast is essentially what we're talking about here. So you don't have to read the book, Joy of Financial Planning, if that's not your thing, reading. But you can listen to a 15 to 25-minute podcast episode on one of these 7 topics and get enough to sort of follow up or follow through on your own to start the practice of doing better in your taxes and your spending and your income. Get motivated, certainly, to do it, and start executing on some of that. So the podcast is really a reflection of the content that's in the book. And of course, the book is really my manifesto for our generation. Since our institutions are failing us in a lot of ways, this is an opportunity from the ground up for us to take our own lives and our own legacies into our own hands. And however you consume that content, for me, whether it's the book, joyfinancialplanning.com, or it's the blog, or it's the podcast, I'm happy to share.
Awesome. And thank you so much for taking the time out today. How do we find you? Where do you live online?
A couple of places, joyoffinancialplanning.com, just as it is. You can find a link to the book. You can find some of the podcasts there in the blog section. So I actually have the narrative listed underneath the podcast. So you can get all that information there. You can find Joy of Financial Planning in your favorite podcast player. And then, of course, my firm is at jasonhowell.com.
Got it. And you also have a Facebook group. Is that right?
I do. And you can search that in Facebook. It's just facebook.com/groups/Joy of Financial Planning.
Got it. Is that a public group, or you have to ask for
you do have to ask. And I set it up that way so people could feel comfortable that it was a curated group of folks that had an opportunity to grow in some level of intimacy. Right now, I think there's about 94 members of the group. And I don't do a lot at this point. I invited the people I wanted to invite. And now, as the people sort of react and interact with themselves, I'm happy to let this be the unit and let it grow organically. It's really meant not so much for, marketing and creating a great, thousands and thousands of people. It's meant for people to be able to discuss the concepts that are in the book and in the mission.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, I'll be sure to put all this in the show notes when the episode comes out as well, to make sure that people can find you. Thank you for taking the time. This has been very helpful and insightful for me personally. I love the concept of just family governance. When we first started talking about it, I was like, family governance? What is that? And so I've definitely been schooled, brother. So I appreciate you taking out the time to...
You're not a Rockefeller? I thought you...
Nah, man.
I thought you were part of that 7th generation.
I'm a Rosa, man. Just 4 letters.
Nice.
One day,
You will be. You do the family governance. I believe in one generation you can change the last name.
That is awesome. Yeah, we gotta keep the last name going for sure, man. So yeah, thank you so much. Just a quick disclaimer: the Jason Howell Company, Build a Better Financial Future, and Retirement Wealth Advisors are not affiliated. This was for educational purposes only. Make sure to always consult with your financial planner, tax preparer, or attorney before you make any decisions for your own personal case. So thank you so much again, Jason, and we look forward to staying in touch. And I need to get a copy of that signed book when I see you in November.
Yes, you will. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Luis.
Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Send Luis an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. To read the show notes and the blog, please visit www.onmywaytowealth.com. Luis Rosa is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. Build a Better Financial Future and Retirement Wealth Advisors are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with the professionals specializing in the fields of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of this information for their situation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested.